Welcome to our program, Dear Brothers and Sisters, where you will hear the raw truth. My name is George, I am your brother, and I love you. Today, we will continue from last week's program, where it was stated that men have been kicked out of the home, and the state has become the new father in the American home, in the American household. And the result has been chaos. Today we will talk about what you and I can do to change that. I remind you again that this program represents or is put on by an organization known as Men's Action to Rebuild Society. That's what this logo is all about here. This is our logo. Know that most everything we speak about on this program has its foundation in my book, Dear Brothers and Sisters, Gender and Its Responsibility. We have available for you flyers about our program. Tells you a little bit about the program, what time it's on. I also have a flyer here at no charge, which says, are you a bull or are you hamburger meat? It's considered a very effective flyer. And on the other side, it says, American Women and the Harem Master. As is our practice, we review the 7 major issues affecting society so that we will not lose sight of these major issues. Number 1, we have 1.5 million men in prison, and that number 1 happens to be what last week and this week's continuation is about, the effect of those 1.5 million men in prison. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world, which means we have more men living in cages per capita than any other nation. Number 2, we have 1 million of our youth in the streets. Of course they're in the streets. Their fathers are the ones that are in prison, for the most part. Number 3, our women are overworked, stressed out, apprehensive about the safety of their children and their own safety. Number 4, crime is rampant, and please do not be deluded by the current statistics that are showing that crime is down. Brothers and sisters, during the last 3-4 years, we have swept the streets of men or of males at the high crime ages and put them in prison. We have increased our prison population by 500,000 in the last 5 years. When the new crop of young men come into society, we will have a high crime rate again. Number 5, our educational system is in a state of dysfunction. Our high schools are holding pens in which little more is learned than how to use condoms. Our colleges and universities give increasingly high grade point averages to students with lower and lower SAT scores. Pretty soon everyone will have an A who goes to college, and no one will know anything. The economy is stagnant at best because we have forgotten the source of new. And you see, it is new that creates jobs. And new comes from the creative will of the masculine gender. And 7th and last, morality and ethics have all but disappeared from society. Those are the 7 major issues affecting us. Now, to continue from last week, men must reassert themselves and get the government out of their homes and the homes of their children. They must reassert themselves and reclaim their wives from the government and provide a stable environment for their children. By doing this, we will restore morality and get the government and provide an environment that will enable women to nurture the race. Right? By doing this, we will restore morality and ethics and provide an environment that will enable women to nurture the race. And as we said last week, the race is not being nurtured, not adequately today. So what are we to do? That's the number one question that's presented to me always. Well, what are we going to do? Well, what's your solution? What are you going to do? I'm not going to do anything. It's what we're going to do. And the first thing that we as men have to do is believe that we can make the change. Let's get rid of this negative thinking of, well, the government has all the power, or they have all the money, or I don't have anything. You have to believe that you have the power and that you can do anything. And that collectively we can do anything our collective minds decide to do. That's the first thing. We're not going to make any changes, my brothers, if you feel you're a nobody. If you feel you can't do anything. If you feel you can't beat the system. My brothers, what you say for you is true for you. What you say for you is true for you. If you go to bed tonight feeling you're a nobody, you may be sure you will wake up tomorrow morning being a nobody. If you go to bed tonight thinking you're a somebody, you will wake up tomorrow morning being a somebody. So the first thing, the very first step in men reasserting themselves is to believe that you can do it. Whatever is in the mind's eye, my brothers, comes to be. Whatever is in the mind's eye comes to be. When a man prays and believes he has received it, it shall be his. Now you have to know this, not just believe it, my brothers, that there is no greater power in the world than the universal will. And that universal will flows through men. And that will can, and literally does, move mountains. So my brothers and sisters, I ask that right now, before you have any other considerations as to how society will be changed, the first and foremost consideration is to know that you have the ability to make change, that you are a power greater than financial power, greater than military power, greater than academic power, that you have the power flowing within you, and that power is called the will. And there is no power on earth that can resist the collective will of people. Remember that. It's important. You have to know this, that you are that power. Now, once we have decided within that we know we can make change, that we know this, now let's look out and say, well, what are some of the near-term changes that we can make? And I don't, my brothers and sisters, believe in legislative change. Well, I shouldn't say don't believe in it. There are those who are, who have beliefs similar to what you have here, and whose forte in life is legislation. And let them do it. Let them legislate, and many of them are doing positive things. But I'm not talking about legislating, which is usually something for someone else to do. I'm speaking right now to you, to all of you. And you're saying, well, George, what can I do? Okay, we're not all attorneys, but you can start living your life differently today. Let's take education, especially the high school and collegiate level. Now, there's a tremendous difference between the way men and women think. Women are here to nurture the race. Consequently, their thinking is physical. They think on the screen. No woman has ever told me I was wrong on this. And on that screen, the pictures have size, form, and color. Size, form, and color. Men don't think on a visual screen because men think conceptually. Now, in the classrooms, where we have co-ed education, which, by the way, has proven by any measure have been a complete failure. Men and women both learn more in single-sex education schools. Our First Lady went to a single-sex education school, and so did most of the famous women who we read about today. They went to single-sex education schools. And they did well. I don't know what their complaint is about making it co-ed, except that they want to try to prove that they can do what men can do, and they cannot. Now, we get into the classroom, and we're discussing something conceptually. Or I'll give you an actual report of what happened to me at an organization I went to, a group of natural hygienists. And I said, look, I have here a study about the effectiveness of vaccinations, that there are many sources claim that vaccinations work against diphtheria, polio, measles, and natural hygienists don't believe that. They don't believe that there's anything communicable. I said, there's a lot of statistics here and facts in this report. How do we refute that? Now, this was a conceptual approach I was using. And one of the women in the group said, she said, never mind all that stuff. We know what works for us. I've been on fruits and vegetables for a year and a half. I lost 100 pounds. Mary, you tell us what it did for you. Now, she took the conceptual thinking of the men, and there were only 2 women and 16 men in that group, and brought it down to the physical thinking of women. Nothing wrong with the physical thinking of women. Men don't go where women are and try and tell them to think differently. Why should women be in our classrooms when men are going through conceptual discussions and thinking and tear it away and bringing it down to the physical? And if we complain about it, right, then we're male chauvinists or sexists or whatever, right? But this is one reason St. Paul, said that women shouldn't speak in church, and if you don't understand, go talk to your husband about it when you get home. That's my feeling in the classrooms. You don't get it, don't destroy what's going on. Keep quiet and ask a man after class. And so what I'm saying to you men, you don't have to legislate. You don't have to do anything other than what you normally do. But when you're in a classroom and you have a conceptual discussion going on and the women bring it down to a materialistic, non-conceptual matter, which is their field of expertise, say, hey, what are you doing? If you don't understand what we're talking about, keep quiet. We'll explain it to you after class. Have the courage to do this, my brothers. Have the courage to do it. Stand up and do it. Deborah Tannen in her book, You Don't Understand, said, women speak an average of 7,000 words a day, men speak an average of 2,000 words a day. Well, you don't need as many words to describe a concept as you do a picture, okay? And at the university level, men should be well steeped in conceptual thinking, because it's conceptual thinking that brings about inventions. It's conceptual thinking that brings about new forms of government, new forms of religion. Conceptual thinking does that. Physical thinking, female thinking, utilizes those new concepts to create different things through its usage. So that's a step. You're in the classroom, say, hold it. I'm a man. This is the way I think. You don't get it, don't interrupt me. That you can do, can't you, fellows? You don't have to legislate, don't have to hire an attorney, don't even have to be part of the organization here. You can do it as an individual. Although it's better if you join our organization so we can collectively do these kinds of things, or support you if you get in trouble in school. See, that's the next battlefield. The battlefield of the new millennia, right? It's not going to be bombs and rockets and depth charges. The battlefield of the new millennia is going to be in the classroom, in the workplace, in the marketplace, at City Hall. That's the new battlefield. That's where men are going to have to exhibit their courage to buck the tide, to buck the socialistic influence in our lives. All right, that was one illustration. I may come back to education depending how the time goes on this program, on this taping here. Qualifications for jobs. Now, we say, well, the reason women are getting the good jobs is because they have the certificates, the licenses, the degrees. The men don't. That's why the women are getting the jobs. That's true. That is why the women are getting the jobs. But those licenses, those certificates, those degrees don't mean that they can do the job and that the man can't. It only means that they went to school and got a license or a certificate or a degree. You see, we have made out of these things an aristocracy of credentialism, which is completely feminist in origin. A certificate is higher than not having a certificate. A degree is higher than the certificate. A bachelor's is higher, is lower than a master's, and a doctor's is higher than a master's. You see, we credentialize it and categorize it. All right? This is the European, feminine, materialistic thinking. Now, true manhood, let's say it's a construction site, you go to the job. Say, look, I have a hammer. Construction manager says, there's some boards, go hammer them. You either know how to hammer them or you don't. You don't need a certificate. Don't say that you took a course in construction engineering or construction management. These things are for women to utilize, to have some legality and validity to enter the world of men. If all the degrees and certificates and licenses were to burn up tonight by some mysterious thing, tomorrow morning the men would get up no different than they got up the day before, and they'd go to work. The women, on the other hand, would have a problem, because they don't have those pieces of paper. So you see, my brothers, it's not education and knowledge that's keeping you from getting the job. What's keeping you from getting the job is the fact that you have not been afforded the same opportunities to get that piece of paper, which really doesn't mean all that much, as women have. Okay? Now, you don't have to put up with that anymore. All right? Or we shouldn't put up with that anymore. Now, some of that is legislation, but some of that is, my brothers, go to those places, to those companies where they don't place a great emphasis on that. And your best shot is with a smaller company. Your best shot is with a smaller company. The smaller the company, the most closely your performance is related to the money that the boss puts in his pocket. And if you can put money in his pocket, he's going to pay you well. Now, in my book, right, that I held up at the beginning of the program, I have a chapter in here about when I first started business. My two key employees were two black women from Mississippi. And I had them tested up here academically. One could read and write at the 2nd grade level, and one could read at the 4th grade level. Get this now, second grade level and fourth grade level for reading and writing ability. I elevated one to be a lead person, and one became my floor lady. The one that could read and write at the second grade level became my floor lady. She ran my shop. Now today she wouldn't be able to get a job in this aristocracy of credentialism. They'd send her to school to try and get her a certificate or a piece of paper, which chances are she wouldn't be able to get if she only could read and write at the second grade level. So she's been oozed out of the market, and many people like that, by this credentialism. And all you young, all you high school boys, never mind about going to school and getting a degree so you could get a job. That's not what you were put here on this earth for. Not that there's anything wrong with going to school and getting a degree, but first you must have a vision, and be a man, and decide what it is you want to do. Right? Don't fall into the category or into the system, right, of getting up or growing up, getting an education and getting a job, and then doing what? What? Escaping? As I said last week, the big industries in America are escape industries. Substance abuse, gambling, entertainment, sports, pornography. Those are the 5 big industries in America today. Escape, because we can't stand this place anymore. So getting back to the practical application, I gave you 2 things right now, all right? 3 things. I told you, number 1, you have to believe within yourself that you can do it. And number 2, I told you how to conduct yourself in the schoolroom. Number 3, I told you about looking for a job. Just go and tell somebody, I can do this. Start off with a small company. Get experience. Become important to the boss. He doesn't recognize your talents, move on to another place, okay? But more important of anything, my brothers, have a vision, okay? How about conduct in the workplace, all right? Well, I could make a whole half-hour program on conduct in the workplace, my brothers. In fact, maybe I will just say this. Don't be so intimidated about sexual harassment. It's a certain naturalness to be assertive with women, and they expect it. Don't let them taunt you and get away with it. Right? If they accuse you of sexual harassment, we're going to develop a new category, and I hope that our organization is going to push it to the forefront, called taunting. Right? If a woman taunts a man, she deserves what she gets. And the way some of these women dress in the workplace today, if you took them out of the office and put them down on the street and got a hooker and stood alongside of her, you couldn't tell the difference between the office worker and the hooker, okay? Now, if they're going to look like a hooker, they should get treated like a hooker. Don't be afraid to stick your neck out, brothers, even if you get put in jail. Look how many of you are going to jail anyway. Might as well get put in jail for a good reason, right? That is a good reason, right? That is preserving the race. That's all I'm going to say about that one at the moment. But you can be sure you're going to hear George make a half-hour segment out of that one. And things you can do. How about cultural performances? Now, very quickly, I will tell you that in Black History Month 2 years ago, the New York, the Metropolitan Museum in New York, Museum of Natural History, had the black diaspora, and I went on a Saturday and a Sunday during Black History Month, and I saw 4 different shows, and I have to tell you, it was heart-rending, all right? It brought tears to my eyes. Showed life on the slave ships, you know, life on the plantations. They had the Kwanzaa religion. I saw 4 very good shows, my brothers and sisters. But I realized when I came home after reviewing those 4 shows, get this now, there was not one man in any of those shows, nor was one man spoken about in any of those shows. It was as though men didn't exist. 400 years of African-American history, and it was done without men. Can you believe that? 400 years of African-American history was done without men. Now, there's either a mass manifestation of the virgin birth, or we've really been left out of the picture. Okay? You take your choice. Okay? Now, what can you do about that? Well, you could, if you are artists, if you are men who are in the performing arts, say, how come we're not in those shows? If you're not a performing artist, you can attend the show and stand up on the stage and say, if it wasn't for us, that wouldn't be. Or you could do some things that are more explicit, which I won't go into now. Right? These are all things now that you can do immediately. You can also support those organizations that have programs for men and for young men. You know, there are various organizations here in the city, well, at least the ones I have found are in Harlem, that have rites of passage for boys. The Blue Nile program at the Abyssinian Baptist Church is one of them. Boys Harbor on East 104th Street is another one. Minnesink on 142nd Street is another one. They all have rites of passage for boys. They teach boys that they're different from girls. Did you know that these programs existed? Why not contact those places or call me and I'll give you their number. So you want to become a part of that. You want to become a part of guiding boys into manhood so that they can fulfill their manly responsibilities, which will enable them to take care of women and children. My brothers and sisters, I thank you for attending this program, tuning in this program this week. Please give me a call. Let's unite and step out and do what's necessary to make positive change in America. See you next week.